other co-principal investigator for the study, but he's not able to join us today. But we are also joined by Adrian Ghilardi, who's a postdoctoral fellow at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, as well as Rudy Drigo, who is a freelance consultant on wood energy planning and forest resource assessment and monitoring. And if you do have any questions that really just can't wait during the presentation, again, we ask that you use the IM function, but in most cases, it's probably easier just to wait for those at the end. And then right after the presentation, we will be also joined by Klaus Sander from the World Bank, who will provide a few comments about his view of the study, as well as Adrian Cortusius from Climate Focus. And with that, I think I'll turn things over to our presenters, and we'll get started with Rob Bayless.
Thank you so much, Julie. I hope everyone can hear me okay. As Julie said, we're going to be presenting the first phase of results from our study, which began about 15 months ago and will run through the end of this year. So just to give an overview of what I'll be presenting, we'll give some background on the study and its relevance for the Global Alliance and for all the stakeholders that are involved. And then we'll review the objectives of our study and describe how we're doing 3 tiers of analysis. And each tier basically represents a scale that you can consider this issue from. This includes a global scale, a national scale, and then a very local or project level scale. And as you might imagine, these are nested, and we can compare results from these different analyses. Then I'll pass over to Rudy, and he'll discuss the methods that were used in this global assessment. And those are the results that we're presenting today. The other things we'll just present a bit of information about their status. So after going through methods, we'll go through results of this first phase, and then we'll give you an update on the status of the national and project level assessments. So just to start with our background, about 80% of the annual wood harvest in tropical developing countries is used as wood fuel. This is a tremendous volume of wood. You imagine all of the uses of wood that we might do besides burn it for energy, building, fencing, poles, all the utilitarian uses, that just represents a small fraction. Nearly all of the wood that's harvested throughout the tropical developing countries is used as energy. And this picture actually captures this quite nicely. You see a small shack that's built out of wood in the background, and then a giant pile of wood that's set to burn for the upcoming season. Historically, historical consumption is that if a tree is cut, it's often thought of as destruction, as deforestation, or at least contributing to degradation. And these are considered major drivers of deforestation and degradation throughout the world. But over time, we've realized that this isn't necessarily the case. So our understanding of these things has improved. So now we realize that wood fuel-driven deforestation and degradation depends on a whole bunch of specific local circumstances and specific management practices. And these 2 pictures capture this quite nicely. So these pictures were taken maybe 10 kilometers apart in central Karnataka just over the past year. And on the left-hand side, you can see an image of wood that's been commercially harvested, really involved in clearing a full stand of trees that will be used for brick burning. And on the right-hand side, you see a woman who's gathering from a very similar kind of area, but gathering for subsistence use and carrying things by the headload. Not necessarily clearing an entire area, sort of selectively picking through and taking wood to cook for a few days. These 2 management, I was discussing, again, why, I feel like I'm in a commercial, why this is important. And stepping away from the Global Alliance for a minute and just thinking about this as a, as a researcher and environmental manager, this is important because in countries that rely heavily on wood fuel, this represents the demand for wood fuel and its supply represents a fundamental relationship between people and their landscape that we still don't really understand very well. We have a lot of misconceptions about this. We're really thankful that the Global Alliance made this funding available to us so that we can dig into this in a really systematic, rigorous way, and make, with good global databases and uniform sets of assumptions, we can examine this issue all around the world and get a better sense for where it really is a problem and where it's not. But I also mentioned, although I'm not sure if I was heard, that this is not a static relationship. So even understanding it at one point in time doesn't give you the full picture. This will change as a result of various pressures on the landscape, pressures that are unrelated perhaps to wood
biomass harvesting, and then we consider scenarios that include, on one hand, the management factors. We have considered two management conditions. One, the one on the left, the optimal resource management, which produce the minimum non-renewable fraction, is assuming that the resources are managed rationally. Rationally does not mean in a sustainable way, but it means that we are not wasting resources, but we are using the resources to optimizing the renewable potential. It is, of course, a virtual condition, but it's important because it sets us the important reference. On the right-hand side, we have what we call the current resource management, and therefore, what is the expected non-renewable fraction. How we estimated this current? This is a very complex, and there are no parameters easily available, but we use FAO statistics on the fraction of forest under management and the fraction of forest cover under planting regime, which imply a more direct control over the resources, to rank the countries according to the level of management. And the higher the management, the lower the non-renewable fraction. Now we're not entering into the detail, but as you will see, that the results, there is a significant impact of that particular component. Of course, the current resource management is likely to be more representative of the situation today. On the left-hand side, you see the other component of the scenario is whether we include or not include the biomass release from land cover change process, deforestation, to make it simple. So deforestation is releasing biomass. Whether we say that the biomass released from deforestation is used as a wood fuel, we have a certain result. Or whether we say, no, that biomass is not used for wood fuel, is either burnt on site or it is used for other purposes. And therefore we have this dual situation. And we see what that impact has on the result. The assumption, particularly on the use of the biomass from deforestation, are that deforestation that we are considering in this case is due primarily to farming expansion and not to fuel wood pressure. Of course, this could open up a very large discussion, of course, but our experience is that land conversion for farming and agriculture are we consider that as the most common cause of deforestation. And although in several situations, wood fuel, the use of the byproducts are catalyze this process. So there is a connection between wood fuel use and deforestation, but often it is just sort of a facilitator, but not the direct cause. Okay, this is the assumption number one. The second assumption is that since this comes from a non-renewable, is deforestation, so by definition, according to general agreement and to the protocols and other agreements, the biomass coming from deforestation is per se defined as non-renewable. This also can be discussion quite a bit because it is non-renewable, but it is replacing other biomass, and therefore it might be considered sort of a more unnatural. But this is, we might, anyway, with this assumption, we have estimated that if we consider that the optimal resource management and we do not consider the contribution of deforestation, then the non-renewable fraction globally over entire our pantropical region range between 13 and 17%, or 180 and 225 million tons. If we consider the same management approach, that means optimal, that means best use of the available resources, but we include the use of byproducts from deforestation, then the non-renewable fraction increases from 13 to 17 to 20 to 23%. And the million tons relevant you see in the slide. And let's say that these are the virtual, in the sense, this is only if we assume that the management, the way we do harvesting is rational. Maybe not sustainable, but definitely rational. The second case is if we consider more the current situation, and that you see significant increase of the non-renewable fraction because area are overexploited and other area are untapped, depending on the management regime and also on land security. There are many, many things that are behind this particular management approach. And if we do not consider deforestation, then we have between 27 and 30%. And if we consider the use of deforestation and the current resource management, the range is between 13 and 34% for a total of something like between 412 and 457 million tons of non-renewable biomass. You can say that this quantity you can equal to the probable degradation of forest resources. Part of it would be deforestation, but most of it was likely to be the quantity of the degradation. And this is really what I think could be the more realistic among the various scenario options. Here we see the distribution of this amount. Here is again, we are assuming the minimum non-renewable biomass. That means through optimal resource management. On top, we have without the consideration of the deforestation byproducts, and the bottom is with deforestation byproducts. You see the difference is that with the second, with the inclusion of deforestation byproducts, since any amount of deforestation byproducts used is considered non-renewable, we have a darker area. We have a higher fraction of non-renewable biomass, but still relatively moderate because we are assuming a very optimal management. Now we see what is the case with the current resource management practices. Everything is darker, so the higher fraction of non-renewable biomass. This is again without, and this is with deforestation byproducts. Probably the bottom image is the more realistic because I should explain that deforestation that we consider to be used is only that falls within the woodshed zone. I mean, we are not including the deforestation occurring in the area which are remote, like in the Amazon, where there is deforestation, but not necessarily a demand associated. The area, the priority area of where the non-renewable fraction appear to be very high, you can see them from the map. There's the dark spots. Among them, those that are highlighted here. Definitely the Ethiopia, Sudan, Uganda, Kenya group is very critical area. But important thing to highlight is that how local are these characters. A country is not all over the country, it's not evenly. And I think the spatial analysis here contributes a lot to identify the priority zones for intervention, for projects, and for further investigation. Now, just a brief touch on the relation between the non-renewable fraction, the people distribution, and what could be the target for GAC. Here we have, in this graph, we show the distribution of the rural population. I mean, population that depends on the resources locally available, mostly informally harvested. So it's really the most vulnerable people in respect of availability of woody biomass for subsistence energy. And the colors they indicate in which context these people are live. So, thanks God, majority lives in the low non-renewable fraction context, but there is a significant amount of people and estimated to be in the range of 276 million rural people that suffer scarcity of subsistence energy. Namely 119 million in Africa, 5 million in Latin America, and 152 million in Asia. These are, I would say, primary target of STOP program, and also of resource, mitigation of environmental impact, and whatever, target, scope this project could have, because here we have, in many ways, these are also the people that have less capacity to afford different fuels. etc. But the analysis allowed to do this, and of course, more detailed sort of link between population, vulnerability, resources, and probably priority for intervention. Just one element that comes out from this analysis and also comparing to the information from country level is that when we discuss about the fuel wood demand, fuel wood is a unique item, a unique commodity, but it is not true. It's very flexible, how population feed or sort of respond to their energy needs. And these children that you see, this is a photo in Rwanda. The children that you see, they are carrying fuel wood. And this fuel wood comes from the pruning of those trees mostly. It is escape entirely whatever forestry perspective of a sustainable or a supply system. And therefore, this escape the analysis. Particularly, I think we need to identify or separate marginal fuel wood from conventional fuel wood and enter deeper into the analysis because we don't know. There's no information about what is the productivity of this fuel wood production system and how sustainable it is. And not knowing this might insert some bias in the results. So this is, I think, an important area of investigation. And this is the end of the Tier 1 result component. And I'm now passing the microphone to Adrian Ghilardi for...
Okay, you can over there. So, give me the microphone. Okay, thank you, Rudy. I'll be very brief on this, as it is a work in progress, but fortunately, you get a good idea on what we are developing. So, basically, as Rob mentioned, the idea, this idea of change in the relationship between people and the environment, in particular between wood fuel harvest and the ecosystem response to the disturb. So the idea behind this Tier 3 analysis is to model wood fuel environmental impacts within dynamic landscapes, where land use changes driven by causes not necessarily driven by wood fuel extraction or population growth and demand changes. So basically, we are developing, we call it a dynamic spatial modeling at landscape level. It's being developed on free software, so it runs over free platforms, freewares, and it's basically it's very similar to what Rudy just explained, but it added time steps that allow repeated cycles of harvest and regrowth, and well, you have some the vegetation is allowed to respond to the disturb, and also it incorporates uncertainty and some stochasticity in some of the processes that are included in the model. So why adding temporal dynamics? So we believe, and we're trying to put this in formal papers, that when you go into higher resolution, the temporal dynamics might be more important. At global level, things won't change much, but at local level, they might change. Basically, harvest events move from one place to another, so people doesn't go exactly to the same place over and over again. And we're talking about a thing that is called raster analysis, where each pixel is like a unit of analysis, so people doesn't go to the same pixel year and year after. So allowing the model to go some days or some years or some months to one place and then change, and allowing the vegetation to respond, give you a different sense of what might be happening. The bottom line of this is to mimic how people go for fuel wood, walk through the landscape and get back with the fuel wood and the vegetation growth again in the next year or in the next iteration process, as we call it. And one important thing about this is that we get a sense of uncertainty. So we might know, we don't have a one value for how above ground biomass or non-renewable biomass or the fraction of non-renewable biomass behaves in a simulation period in 20 or 30 years, as it is here exampled. But we have more or less a sense on the variation of the results. Basically, we are developing this in 2 case studies where we are conducting fieldwork as well. One is in Western Honduras and the other is in Southern India. The areas are relatively similar. Honduras is 1,000 square kilometers, and India is around 4,000 square kilometers. Next, please. So, as Rob mentioned in the beginning, we are also using some field-gathered data to fill in the model and to try to validate some parameters. Some of this data is related to where are the people going for fuel. So we're using very small GPSs to track where people are going, and we're also conducting surveys. We're measuring a couple of stuff there, so we get a sense of what is really happening and to see that if the model replicates that or mimics that or not. Next, please. So this is just a couple of slides on the tracks. This is people going for fuel. So in Honduras, they're going, basically in a round circle around the locality. In India, this is a case that it's interesting because they're moving only to one side. That's not because land tenure, but because they're picking up fuel from those shrubs that you can see in the lower left corner of the image. Next, please. Okay, and so that's the idea. We're now undergoing. We're about to send a couple of papers for peer review process. So after this peer review process, fortunately, finishes and we receive good comments, then we will be uploading these scripts and models. So the idea is for people to download that and use their own data to run the model and get their own NRB and FNRB estimates for the case studies or for the project developers. The idea is that it's not very easy like a video game, but with a one-week course, I believe that people will be able to upload the data, integrate their analysis, and get a good sense of what might be happening in their own study area. These are all, as I said in the beginning, these are all scripts and submodels that's running freeware. So you need to install a couple of styles, there are a couple of compilations, but in the bottom line is it won't be very, very much difficult. And the user-friendly tool was one of the promised objectives of this GACC project we are conducting with Rob and Ruth. So that's all from my side.
Great. Well, thank you to Rob, Rudy, and Adrian for that really excellent presentation. I know we got a bit delayed due to the audio difficulties we were having earlier, so I hope people can stay on for maybe 10 more minutes for the discussion and Q&A. And I wanted to, before we get to the actual Q&A, I wanted to invite Klaus Sander from the World Bank and Adrian Corthuis from Climate Focus to just make a few brief comments about their thoughts on the study based on their individual perspectives. And so maybe we can start with Klaus. So Klaus, if you want to go ahead, I've just unmuted you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thanks for the invitation to provide a few comments on today's presentation. I'll try to be very short. First of all, I think what we all have to acknowledge with regard to this work, it's some sort of a Herculean task because it's unique and it's global. And I think all the data, the thoughts, the analysis that have to go into this kind of work is just tremendous and enormous. So we all, I think, when we discuss this kind of work, have to consider what's behind it. And I think the team has to be commended for what they have done, and I think it's great. It's definitely, I think, unique. I don't know of any other analysis that have been done at the same scale and with the same level of analysis. So this is also important to emphasize. As discussed by the presenters, I think one of the key constraints of this whole exercise is not so much the technical aspects of the analysis, but it's the data that is available. And the data, given that it's such a multidimensional analysis, it's data on all kinds of ends and fronts of this analysis. It starts with the forest data, the biomass data. It includes also the resolution of the images used. It includes the demand side. It includes so many other aspects where data is either suboptimal, to say the least, or where assumptions had to be made to to key some data into the model, which definitely in the future need to be refined and improved and enhanced over time. And I think if we would talk probably in 5 or maybe 10 years from now, my expectations would be that those models would be much more accurate and much more detailed compared to today. But I think that is the main, or that should be one of the main conclusions for this kind of exercise. That this is a first of its kind. It's great. It's a great approach, and that now from now on, the task has to be to feed it with better data on all kinds of ends. Maybe improve a little bit the analysis, as Adrian at the end also suggested, to provide this time scale dimension, and then derive better models and better results. What are the implications? I'm focusing a little bit more here on the policy side, and I think what I'm hinting at is is the communication of the results, especially the communication of the results of this first exercise, because I think it's a fine line. Or what is my assumption is that the objective of this work is also to engage in a constructive dialogue with client countries on the issue of wood energy. But I think there's a fine line to achieve this or not to achieve this, because if you talk about non-renewable biomass, and if you potentially report large numbers of non-renewable biomass, but these numbers may be a little bit less robust given the data that is available. I think there's a fine line whether you can engage with the government or with stakeholders, or whether you cannot engage because they're so scared off, given the way maybe initial results are reported, that you close the door on a constructive dialogue very early on in the process. So my recommendation on the communication and reporting of the results is that anything that is reported at this point in time, given the data constraints that I just mentioned before, and that also the presenters acknowledged and recognized in their work and in the presentation today, is that the limits to this analysis have to be communicated right square, front and center everywhere, maybe in the report and any kind of presentation, to say, hey, this is a first analysis and we have to move on from this, and we have to maybe a conclusion is, if you're interested, we have to do things and analysis for a specific country or sub-region or even subnational level. And as Rudy rightly mentioned, for Rwanda, there was an example where just a resolution of a higher resolution of the images used already resulted in a quite significant shift of result of the analysis. Because one thing is clear, I mean, the deforestation rate has nothing, or does say very little about the supply of wood, given tree and biomass resources outside of forests, which are not captured in higher resolution images as one of the key data constraints. Two short more comments here. On slide 6, you have a definition for the non-renewable biomass. And my only comment there, I mean, I'm personally, and that's my personal view, I'm personally not so happy with the use of the term non-renewable biomass. I think it comes out of the carbon finance discussions, but I'm personally not so happy. And the definition I see on slide 6, I have to say, the more I read it, the more I think this is the definition of sustainability and not of non-renewability. And I would be completely happy if we were saying that if these conditions prevail that are mentioned in that slide, then it's unsustainable, and I would fully agree. So if we could work in the future also a little bit more on the communication and presentation of this term non-renewable, because I find it has a very negative connotation to it, and I'm getting a little worried about that. And lastly, how would you deal with and that's more a question, how would you deal with the aspect of trade? Because if you have a supply constraint somewhere with any other commodity, people start trading this commodity, and I think that's the same with wood fuel. how would you address in the future, or have you thought about this, how you could address this in the future with your model, these woodshed analysis, bringing trade into the equation there? And I want to end my comments here and really commend the team again for this work. I think it's great. I think it's important that it's out there. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Klaus, for some really good comments and questions there. Before maybe the team here responds to some of those questions, I wanted to invite Adrian Corthusius from Climate Focus to add a few comments from the climate finance perspective. So, Adrian, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Adrian, are you there?
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yep, we can hear you.
Very good. Hello all. Hello, Julie. Thank you very much for this great presentation, especially for myself, who doesn't come from a scientific background. It's always great to see the science behind the numbers and how you get to that. So I was very impressed with the enormous amount of work that you guys have carried out. And now for my comments from the climate finance perspective. My comments, so after hearing your presentation, I actually wonder what climate finance for cookstoves can do with it. To get it a bit in perspectives, if you are working from a climate finance perspective, then basically you want to get money for your cookstoves. And that is what the Alliance is after when promoting climate finance for cookstoves. Then, and that sounds a bit funny, the accuracy behind the data are probably less relevant than the actual numbers that can be used. So I've always been a promoter of very rough methods to enable project developers to just use data, rely on data, and then calculate either their carbon credits or whatever result-based payments based on those data. So from a project developer perspective, even when they are inaccurate, global data or countrywide data or non-renewable biomass are sufficient, and they don't actually need regional or local or subnational or whatever kind of data that you make available. So as far as your study is concerned, I think from a policy perspective, it is very interesting to see that the non-renewable character of woody biofuel varies per country and varies per region and varies per province. But I would not encourage that these data are used or are used or are being obliged to be used for promoting carbon programs for cookstoves, because that will provide a lot more effort to project developers in a world where it is already quite difficult to monetize on carbon credits. So yeah, that is my main thought. So on the one hand, I'm very pleased to see that there is science behind numbers. Talking from the perspective of climate finance, I see limited application only, and I would continue supporting just plain numbers for people who are in the field, without the need to go into detail or rely on this. Then on the actual value of the numbers that you've come across. On average, you see numbers of, say, under 50%, and in some places, only in some places, over 80%, which is probably good news for the world, which is probably bad news for the majority of cookstove programs in the world, because they rely on actual high numbers of non-renewable biomass, because that directly relates to the carbon payments that they receive. in that sense, the Alliance might wonder what to do with the results of this study, because implementing the very results, so the numbers of this study into the increasing number of carbon projects for cook stoves would probably mean that we cut their income by 75% or more when we would rely on the studies, on the results of this study. And I don't think that is something that we would like to promote, would we? So far, my comments.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Adrian. And I think Sumi is standing ready to reply to some of your comments. I also wanted to invite people, if they'd like to submit questions via that IM function, to do so now so we can start compiling those so our presenters can answer them. But maybe Sumi, will start with you as sort of response to the comments.
Sorry, I do want to hand it over to our presenters to respond, but I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind, Adrian, for those of you, some other people on the phone may not be so familiar with the intricacies of carbon finance, and I was wondering if perhaps you could let people know kind of in general what the kind of default value or what estimates are being used for FNRB in ongoing existing carbon finance projects, so just so that they have an idea of, you know, when you're talking about the implications, what exactly would be involved.
Okay. So I'm still unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. So in least developed countries, the UNFCCC has been so kind to compile a list with factors, and I have no clue where they get it from, but the average number is well over 90%, which from a project developer perspective is very nice, because it gives you high numbers per cook stove, a high number of carbon credits. So again, the main source of the NRB factors that are being out there right now is the list compiled by the UNFCCC. For the non-LDC countries, such as Kenya and Ghana, individual project developers have compiled their own NRB factors, and the methodology they apply there is mostly dig into existing research, which can be FAO studies or available local research, and then, well, basically what the project developers do is try to pick the highest number they come across and present it to the validator as a valid estimate, which is then often accepted.
Well, should we take some more questions, or should we respond to? Okay. Okay. So yeah, this is a sort of fundamental tension that we have going into this research. This is Rob replying, by the way. As our results were coming out, and I somewhat suspected that we would find results that were quite a bit lower than were being claimed in project design documents for carbon markets, and so as a big proponent of cook stove interventions and finding whatever finance is available and whatever the participants or stakeholders are willing to pay into these projects, I was always somewhat concerned that we would find results that actually didn't boost the market, but possibly led to less justification for finance. And indeed, that's what we're finding in most places. So while we certainly don't want this activity to be constrained by the results of our analysis, we also don't want to be overstating the benefits of these activities in the sense that giving people the impression that we can actually have a dramatic impact on deforestation when in fact we might not be able to. In fact, I mean, that's what happened when the first wave of household energy interventions happened back in the 1970s and early 1980s. It was to address this kind of perceived crisis, right, of fuel wood scarcity and deforestation, and interest soon was lost in these kinds of interventions because it was demonstrated that you can't actually address deforestation in many cases by reducing wood fuel demand. And there were other issues as well back in those days. One of the other objectives of this project is not to increase the burden on project developers, but rather to hand make available a systematic database that says, okay, in this district, in this country, we find that FNRB is very likely within this range of possibilities, and depending on your assumptions, which we made very transparent, depending on our assumptions, you might be at a slightly higher end or slightly lower end, and whatever the I guess gatekeepers of carbon finance decide is a more justified set of assumptions that would determine whether we should be on the higher end or the lower end, perhaps. Carbon markets tend to, at least when they were first conceived, tend to be conservative, right? So erring on the side of fewer emissions reductions per unit of activity. But I found actually, while that is the case in some components, like making assumptions about leakage or making assumptions about permanence. In fact, with this particular parameter, a lot of the erring is actually on the side of not so conservative. So honestly, I'm not sure how this work will be received in either in the UNFCCC or the CDM Executive Board if it gets to them, or in the gatekeepers of the voluntary markets. And I'd be happy to be part of a conversation that tries to maybe harmonize our assumptions in a better way. But yeah, we find that a lot of projects are probably overstating their benefits, and whether or not the market can respond or not care, well, that's okay. We're not participants in the market. We're simply trying to inform society's understanding of what the impacts of these projects are. Rudy, do you want to add anything, or Adrian?
I think that you made a good description, Rob, and I agree that some of the instrumental estimates might be useful on the short term, but might not be. The risk is that they might depress this sector in the long term. So we don't know, and I think, as you said, that it is important to enter into maybe a dialogue on this particular the influence of the NRB and I would say that the benefit of the STOV program as this data can also probably emphasize on the socioeconomic component should be coming maybe more. I think it should be an important result more than simply the NRB estimates, the FNRB, and I agree also with Clark's definition that is not a nice way of calling. It's not a non-renewable, it's actually a non-sustainable fraction. And we use this non-renewable just because this is in the definition that is recognized in this particular sector, although maybe in some part incorrect. But I think we should look at the results also from other perspectives in which we can focus and identify priority area of intervention beyond simply the carbon benefit of a STOV. Although I think it's important, since we look at the estimates done so far, it's important to set some clarity, and we hope that we contribute to clarity with our work.
Great, thank you, Rudy and Rob. So we have a question on the idea of the deforestation byproducts. And so someone is asking if we could explain this a bit more and what these are and how they're used or not used in the deforestation or non-renewable part. And then they also had a question on whether the data is available from a single location associated with the study, or if there's a reference sheet that lists all the data sets used, and where can they find it. So Rudy, if you want to take that.
Concerning the how we consider the byproduct of deforestation in to respond, to fill up the demand for wood fuel is it comes, of course, from the observation in the field that no resources are wasted in general where there is a demand present. At the same time, a land cover change process, a conversion for agriculture, a conversion for expansion, whether it is for small scale or large scale farming. And these resources are used, and there are few exceptions, important exceptions, like in the Amazon area, where the changes of land are rarely accompanied by large population or demand for fuel wood. So I would say that probably the use of byproducts from deforestation are not so important in the Amazon region, though if you go into the coastal area in the northeast of Brazil, any biomass that is derived from the Caatinga for expansion of farming, that is used for energy, either directly as fuel wood or for production of charcoal. It is sometimes also use of the fuel wood and charcoal from land cover conversion catalyze the conversion itself, because they pay for part of the completely for the conversion costs. So they are not entirely independent, but we assume by inserting this as an alternative to the direct harvesting that the main reason for their production is farming expansion, cattle ranching, or other uses. I hope I could answer this question. They are either, most commonly, they are transforming charcoal because that allows them to be transported easily to the market and to have a higher price. And we consider that we consider that only the byproducts that are located within the woodshed area, it's the area that we assume to be where the harvesting is concentrated, were included in our calculation, and not the whole lot of the let's say the stock, the cut trees are used for energy, but we estimated 70%, since considering that about 30% is a very rough estimate, are used as timber or as construction material.
There's a question about currently, we haven't made our, an individual country level data or subnational level data public yet, because we're still ironing out some of the kinks, and we intend to submit an analysis for a publication, and those requirements mean that we can't release this to the public yet. But eventually, this will be fully released to the public and made available. We haven't decided, either on the Global Alliance's website or on one of us, our universities will host. So yes, eventually things will be made completely available. If you do have questions about a specific country, we're happy to discuss this on a case-by-case basis. But again, we've gone through one round of peer review through the Global Alliance, but we'd still like a little bit more validation before we make this stuff completely public.
Did you have any other comments that you wanted to make, maybe in response to some of the issues that Klaus raised? Adrian?
Klaus asked, well, I believe it's for Rudy at the global level, but Klaus asked this question on how markets are included. Do you want to add that?
Trade, yeah.
Trade, exactly.
At the global level, trade was as considering as practically to support the commercial harvesting, but no economic component were included in the analysis. I think these are extremely well. The only element that we consider is that the minimum, what we call minimum commercial biomass characteristics. That sense that while for a local use, any piece of wood is potentially usable for the household use, as it is also collected freely or locally. For the production of charcoal or for the production of commercial fuel wood, only certain characteristics, certain characteristic of productivity or location density of material were applied. Below a certain level, the resources have no commercial interest because they are either too sparse or not adequate to fill a truck in a day, for instance, or something of the sort. So, but that is as far as we went in the global study. But at national and at local level, of course, this is very important, and the characteristic might be spelled out far more clearly, and that is possible at the local level. We could not see a way of doing it at the global analysis now.
No, just to add a little bit to class questions, yeah, as Rudy says, the national or this tier 3, tier 2 analysis, we do include market and trade, but not from an economic perspective, but basically we have some assumptions on how far wood can travel. And yeah, basically we add numbers and assumptions that get wood traveling from hundreds of kilometers, basically. So a big city or a huge demand center might be in the model pulling wood from hundreds of kilometers apart. Of course, the farther from the demand center, the less chance to have that. But we're not modeling only local wood fuel supply demand, but it's spread around a country or a huge region. Although we are not adding any economic in terms of monetary or financial assumptions into the analysis, we have this idea that if there is a demand, there will be a movement from wood from one place to another, although it's far away, and it must be marketed because nobody will be walking for hundreds of kilometers or taking wood fuel for free. I'm not sure if that is a fair enough answer.
Sure. That's a fair enough answer. I was just also, and I think, I was also thinking more, maybe that in the future, depending on which direction the whole wood energy sector will turn to, and from latest reports, the assumption is that it will become actually more important. With more importance, it may become more commercialized. With more commercialization, maybe trade will become more informal, and then also potentially over longer distances in various products that would be interesting then to have those kind of considerations in supply and demand modeling. That's kind of like more from where I came from, because I think the whole aspect of trade is also one part of the constructive dialogue one could engage with countries in to show actually that maybe some countries have a comparative advantage of being wood fuel producers, wood fuel exporters, whereas others would be then the wood fuel importers.
That's something. It's one of those areas where the data shortage that we've all mentioned comes into play, right? We hear about some anecdotal evidence of speaking about international trade at this point, about transboundary exchange of wood fuels, like across the border between Haiti and Dominican Republic, for example. But there is no hard data on this anywhere. You hear about some transfer of charcoal from the Horn of Africa region, Somalia and Kenya, to Yemen, for example. But it's so anecdotal. To do this at a global level of a global assessment, we need much firmer data to start being able to build this in a way that has any kind of believability, I think. For our global assessment, we made national boundaries firm. We essentially assumed that there is no transnational trade, and we know that's not completely true. But again, we would have to go through things on a case-by-case basis and deal with a lot of anecdotal information in order to incorporate it. But you have a point. As time goes on, I think it's going to increase in importance. Now you see transfer of biomass from West Africa to Europe because of filling renewable energy mandates and co-firing of biomass in coal-fired power plants and things like that. This will become, I think, more and more relevant.
Yep, that's basically along the lines I was thinking. Well,
sure.
Great. Any last comments from any of our presenters? Rudy?
One last just comment or reply to your comment regarding Rwanda. As you know, I've been working in Rwanda in various occasions, and I think the most comprehensive analysis is the output of our last program for the master plan. And the results at national level are different from the one that come out now from the global analysis. But I think this difference is very important. I think this is one of the factors I highlighted as one of the issues to analyze, because if we understand why this such a difference, then I think we are able to feed back into also the global model and better understand what happens in the countries where there is a big demand and very limited resources of forest, where, of course, the default FNRB value would be high, although the situation is far less unsustainable as it might appear. So this, I think, is good that there is a difference there, because that is a direction where we have to study more. And Rwanda is a very interesting case. Also for the trade, for instance, Rwanda is, although it's a country that has theoretically a big gap, is exporting more than importing fuel wood and charcoal. But when we come to that level, it seems that it is only a matter of a few thousand tons, and that is not relevant at the big number level. But I think Rwanda is a very interesting case, and that I promote and I propose that this is included among our study area for the remaining part of the project.
Great. Well, it looks like we're quite over time at this point. So I think we'll end there. But thank you again to our presenters as well as our discussants today for a really excellent presentation. This has been recorded and will be made available on our website. So please do share with any colleagues who maybe could not make it today but would like to view. So thank you all again. And with that, I think we'll close.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, class. Congrats.